I did not date Matteo because I wanted a simple life. The thing is, poverty looked interesting from my side of the glass. I thought dating him would make me look deeper, softer, more real, like a rich girl brave enough to step below her level. Then, I called him useless in front of my whole family. My father listened, looked at Matteo, and asked him to save the company I thought was mine. My name is Cressida Whitmore. I was 31, and I was Director of Brand Experience at Whitmore Foods and Logistics. I saw myself as the polished daughter, the one who understood standards, rooms, tone, and the family name. The thing is, I believed a person's level showed in the way they moved through life. My father built the company before I was born. By the time I was old enough to understand what Whitmore meant, it meant private dinners, charity galas, executive floors, and people lowering their voices when my father entered a room. I grew up thinking that respect was something our name created. Matteo Cruz entered my life through a service door. It was at a charity gala hosted at the old Harrington Hotel, where the balcony smelled like rain on stone and expensive perfume. I had stepped outside because Blair was talking too loudly about a woman wearing last season's dress. Matteo was there with a clipboard, coordinating a late food delivery after one of the catering vans broke down. He did not speak to me like staff usually did. He did not shrink. He asked if I needed the door held because the wind kept catching it. I asked if he knew who I was. He said he knew I was standing in front of a door that was hard to open with one hand. That should have annoyed me. Instead, it made me look at him longer. Later, Blair asked why I kept watching the delivery guy. I told her he was interesting in a simple way. She said dating someone like him would make me look humble, like a rich girl with a documentary phase. I laughed because that was our realism. We said cruel things in soft voices and called it honesty. Matteo took me to a small diner after his shift a week later. He knew the server's name. He thanked the cook through the little window near the register. He ordered carefully, like money had weight. He asked if I was uncomfortable because the place was not my standard. I told him it was refreshing. That night, I texted Blair that it felt like visiting another country without leaving the city. Matteo thought I was entering his life. I thought I was trying on a lower level. Matteo's apartment was on the third floor of a narrow brick building with a hallway that smelled like old carpet and someone's boiled onions. The light outside his door flickered when we walked in. He apologized for it even though the bulb was not his fault. The thing is, I noticed everything. The sofa had a blanket over one arm where the fabric was worn. The kitchen table was small enough that my knees almost touched his. The mugs did not match. A stack of bills sat under a magnet on the fridge, neat and straight, like being organized could make them less heavy. Matteo cooked for me that first night at his place. Chicken, rice, beans, and a little salad with lime. He said his mother taught him how to make it when he was 16 because she worked late and he had to feed himself and his younger cousins. I told him it was sweet. Sweet was the word I used when I wanted to avoid saying poor. He asked if I liked it. I said of course because I knew how to be gracious. Standards did not mean I was rude. That was always my defense. I could look down on something and still say thank you beautifully. Later, I sent Blair a photo of his tiny kitchen sink with one clean plate drying beside it. I told her his apartment looked like a poverty museum with Wi-Fi. She sent laughing faces and asked if I was still doing my working-class boyfriend project. I did not correct the word project. That was the first lie I chose without calling it one. Matteo started entering my world after that. I took him to restaurants where the host knew my last name before I opened my mouth. He studied menus longer than I thought necessary. Not because he could not read them, but because he looked at prices like each number touched a nerve. At one Italian place with candles too close to the flowers, he chose the cheapest pasta. I told him he looked like the bill was physically attacking him. He smiled in that careful way he had when he did not want to embarrass me by being hurt. Then he said he respected money because he knew how long it took to earn. I heard a lack of ambition in that sentence. I told him there was a difference between respecting money and letting it scare him. He looked at me over the rim of his water glass and asked if I thought careful people were scared people. I said people like him often confused survival with wisdom. The table became quieter after that. The waiter came to ask about dessert, and Matteo said no before I could order anything. I ordered anyway because I did not like ending a meal on his limits. When Matteo visited my office for the first time, he brought coffee before a client presentation. He had worked late the night before, but he still remembered that I preferred oat milk and no cinnamon. The lobby smelled like polished stone and fresh flowers. My assistant smiled at him without knowing where to place him. I introduced him to 2 co-workers as my boyfriend who kept me connected to real people. They laughed politely. Matteo handed me the coffee and stayed quiet. After the presentation, he waited near the elevators. He asked why I could not simply say his name without attaching his background to it. I told him I was proud of being open-minded enough to date outside my world. He said, being someone's proof of open-mindedness was not the same as being loved. That should have been a serious sentence. I treated it like a complaint. I told him he was too sensitive. I said he should appreciate that I brought him into better rooms instead of acting wounded because I described the difference between us. He asked if better meant richer. I told him better meant higher standards. He nodded once, and after that he stopped visiting my office unless I asked twice. When he did come, he waited in the lobby instead of coming upstairs. I told Blair he was insecure around success. Blair said that made sense because success was not his natural climate. Again, I laughed. For months, this became the shape of us. I brought Matteo into beautiful places and acted generous. He brought me into ordinary places and acted proud. I treated his world like a short-term lesson, something that made me appear deeper at brunch and more compassionate at galas. He noticed. One Sunday, he took me to a street market where his cousins sold flowers from a folding table. It was loud and crowded, and the pavement was wet from a morning rain. Matteo knew the vendor selling oranges. He knew the woman who made tamales. He knew the old man who fixed watches under a blue tarp. People greeted him like he belonged there. That bothered me more than it should have. He bought me a paper cup of coffee and asked why I kept looking bored. I told him I was not bored. I said I was observing. He asked if people were people to me when I observed them, or if they became examples. I told him he was turning a simple morning into an argument. He said I turned simple lives into stories for Blair. The consequence was small. He took my cup when I did not drink it, threw it away, and walked slower beside me. He did not reach for my hand again that day. That night, Blair asked how fieldwork with the locals had gone. I told her Matteo was starting to forget his place. Matteo invited me to dinner at his mother's house on a Thursday evening when the rain had made the sidewalks shine. The apartment building was older than his, with narrow stairs and a hallway full of cooking smells. I wore a cream dress because I thought dressing well showed respect. The thing is, respect still meant my standard. Marisol Cruz opened the door with a towel over one shoulder and warmth in her face. She did not look impressed by me, but she did not look afraid of me either. She welcomed me as if I were already expected, already counted, already given a place at her table. The kitchen was small. One chair had been repaired with a darker piece of wood. The cabinets had old handles, and the tablecloth had a faint burn mark near the edge. A pot steamed on the stove. The window above the sink showed the brick wall of the next building. Marisol served me first. She gave me the largest piece of chicken. I saw Matteo notice it. His eyes softened with pride, not shame. That bothered me because I had expected apology from him. I had expected him to explain the small table, the old chair, the simple plates. Instead, he looked at his mother as if she had given me something grand. Marisol asked if I liked spice. I said I did. She told me Matteo used to pretend he did not like spicy food when he was little because he wanted more rice for his cousins. Everyone smiled except me. Not because it was not sweet. It was. That was the problem. For a few minutes, the room stopped looking poor in the way I used that word. It looked careful. It looked alive. It looked like people had made enough out of not enough and still saved the largest piece for a guest who had arrived judging the chairs. A door opened in my head, quiet and thin. Maybe money was not the only proof of class. Maybe dignity did not need marble floors. Maybe people like Matteo had been carrying something my family only purchased. My phone buzzed with a message from Blair asking if I had survived dinner. I took a photo of the kitchen corner, the repaired chair half visible, and sent it to her. I wrote that field research was going well. The door closed. After dinner, Matteo walked me downstairs. He asked why I had taken the photo. I said it was cute. He said his mother's kitchen was not decoration. I told him he was making honesty difficult. He said I kept calling disrespect honesty when it saved me from being ashamed. That was his quiet debrief. He did not raise his voice. The rain outside did enough of the talking, tapping against the metal awning above the entrance. A week later, I brought Matteo to the Whitmore warehouse because I wanted to show him real business. Not diners, not street markets, not tiny kitchens with repaired chairs. Scale, systems, movement, my level. The warehouse floor smelled like coffee, cardboard, diesel from the loading bay, and cold rain on employees' jackets. Forklifts moved between rows while drivers checked tablets near the dispatch desk. My silver keycard opened the glass door with one small beep. Matteo received a visitor badge. I liked that difference more than I should have. Ron Bell, the shift manager, approached us with a clipboard. He had grey hair, thick hands, and the tired patience of someone who had repeated the same warning too many times. He said the new scheduling system was causing route delays. He said the drivers had flagged it for weeks. I told him operations always complained when leadership improved systems. Ron's mouth tightened. He looked past me at Matteo, maybe because Matteo was listening. Matteo asked which routes were overloaded and whether the problem was the software or the way management had grouped deliveries. Ron answered immediately. That irritated me. The two of them spoke for 6 minutes, and in those 6 minutes the warehouse felt less like my family's company and more like a room I had entered without knowing the language. Matteo asked about driver teams, cold storage timing, and the way restaurant clients handled late deliveries. Ron gave names. Matteo remembered them. I cut in and said we were not there to redesign the floor. Matteo looked at me, then at Ron, and thanked him for explaining. Employees nearby watched that. I saw it, noticed it, though I did not like what it meant. They looked at Matteo with respect after one conversation. They looked at me like a closed office door. Later, in the car, I said people like Matteo naturally understood people who wore safety vests. He said those people kept my company alive. I corrected him. I said they kept my family company moving, which was not the same as leading it. He turned his visitor badge over in his hand. Then he placed it in the cup holder between us, like something he was done carrying. For the first time, Matteo saw that I did not only look down on him. I looked down on the whole floor. The crisis at Whitmore Foods and Logistics did not arrive with drama. It arrived in late deliveries, missing pallets, angry restaurant clients, and emails with subject lines that got shorter every week. My father called it a systems failure. I called it a messaging problem. The thing is, I knew how to protect an image. That was my work. Brand trust, client confidence, internal tone. A company could survive a delay if people still believed it knew what it was doing. So I prepared a town hall. The employee cafeteria had been rearranged with rows of folding chairs and a small platform near the vending machines. The air smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. Drivers came in wearing rain jackets. Warehouse staff stood near the back with arms folded. Ron Bell was there too, clipboard tucked under one arm. I wore navy because navy said control. My father stood at the back with Nadia. He did not introduce me. He only watched. I told the room that Whitmore had always represented excellence. I said accountability mattered at every level. I said delays came from gaps in execution and that we would be raising standards across the company. A driver lifted his hand and said the route loads were impossible under the new schedule. I told him every company faced pressure. Ron said the floor had warned leadership about the system 3 times. He said the driver teams were not failing the company. The schedule was failing the driver teams. I said people often resisted change when they lacked vision. The room went still after that. Not silent. Still. There is a difference. A woman in a warehouse vest looked down at her shoes. A driver near the vending machine shook his head once. Ron closed his clipboard. At the back, Nadia leaned toward my father and said I did not know their names. I heard it because the microphone had gone quiet and the room carried small sounds. My father did not answer her. That was worse than if he had defended me. After the town hall, Matteo waited outside by the loading dock. Rainwater dripped from the metal roof in steady lines. He had heard about the meeting from one of the drivers he knew from his own work. I told him it was inappropriate for him to involve himself. He said people were talking because I had humiliated them while asking them to save my family's reputation. I told him workers always acted wounded when asked to meet standards. He asked whose standards I meant. I said business standards, professional standards, Whitmore standards. Matteo said my standard was obedience, not excellence. That sentence cut because it sounded like something my father might say if he were less careful. I told Matteo he was defending them because they were his level. His face changed then. Not anger, something more tired. He said he had thought if I saw his world clearly, I would stop treating it like a place beneath me. That was his vulnerable moment. Plain. Sad. No strategy. I turned it into insecurity because that was easier to manage. I said he should not make my company crisis about his background. I said I had enough pressure without my boyfriend asking me to apologize for having standards. He looked toward the warehouse doors. Inside, people were returning to work under fluorescent lights. He said those people had tried to help me, and I had punished them for knowing more than I did. I told him he sounded dramatic. The next day, my father called me into his private office. The room had dark wood shelves, framed photos from early company years, and a glass case holding the first delivery receipt Whitmore ever issued. I used my silver keycard to enter the executive floor, and the beep felt like confirmation. My father asked how I would fix the root issue. I gave him my prepared answer. Client reassurance, internal retraining, stronger performance language, better dashboards, more accountability. He listened without moving. Then he asked which staff members I had spoken to directly. I named Ron. He asked for 3 more. My mouth opened, then closed. That was the first visible crack inside the family. Not a fight. A missing list. He asked if I knew the names of the driver team leads on the delayed restaurant routes. I said operations had those details. He said leadership should have them too. I told him I was not a dispatcher. He said no, I was not. Then he looked at the old receipt in the glass case and said the company had been built by people who knew the truck numbers before they knew the investors. That night, at the family estate, Graham and Nadia were already there when I arrived for dinner. Elise moved flowers on the table, though they did not need moving. My father asked for honest opinions after dessert. Graham said I would rather protect the family image than protect the company. Nadia said Matteo understood the warehouse problem in 10 minutes. I laughed because the alternative was letting the sentence land. I told them Matteo was good at sounding wise around people who did manual work. I said that did not make him executive material. Elise told me to lower my voice. I told her the family was becoming sentimental. My father folded his napkin and placed it beside his plate. That was the silent decision marker, though I did not know it then. He did not argue. He did not warn me. He simply stopped treating my future as settled. The family board dinner was held in the private dining room beside the glass-walled boardroom. That room had always felt like mine before. The long table, the low lights, the framed black and white photos of the first Whitmore trucks, the silver water pitchers lined up like they had been measured with a ruler. The thing is, I came prepared to be restored. I wore a perfect black dress, simple enough for seriousness and expensive enough for my level. My hair was pinned back. My notes were in a leather folder. The company keycard rested in my purse like a small piece of proof. Victor sat at the head of the table. Elise sat to his right. Graham leaned back with his arms crossed. Nadia had a tablet open. Matteo sat near the far end, not as family, not as staff, but as the boyfriend I had allowed into the room. That placement bothered me. Blair was not invited, but I had already texted her before walking in. I told her my family had lost their minds and were acting as if Matteo was some hidden business genius. Usually she would answer in seconds. This time the message stayed read with no reply. I put the phone face down. Victor began by asking for honest ideas about the crisis. I gave the answer I had prepared. I said the company needed a client confidence campaign, staff retraining, and a stronger internal standard around accountability. I said the Whitmore name had been weakened by people who forgot they represented something larger than themselves. It sounded good. I knew it sounded good. Then Nadia asked Matteo what he thought. Before he could answer, I laughed. It came out too sharp, but I did not pull it back. Stopping would have made me look weak. I said the family should stop wasting time on my boyfriend's opinions. The room went quiet. Matteo looked at me, not surprised. That almost made it worse. I said he was sweet, and of course I cared about him, but he was not built for rooms like this. I said he understood poverty, not business. I said people like him knew how to work under families like ours, not advise them. Elise said my name and told me to stop. I did not. I said everyone was confusing hardship with intelligence. I said being poor did not make a man wise. I said Matteo was poor for a reason, and bringing him near a boardroom did not make him useful. That was the line. I knew it when I said it, because even Graham stopped shifting in his chair. Matteo folded his hands on the table. Victor did not defend me. He turned to Matteo and asked how he would save the company. The humiliation I had built for Matteo turned around so quietly that I did not see the first step of it. Matteo did not rush. He did not look grateful for permission to speak. He looked at Victor and said the company's problem was not branding. It was trust. The routing system had been changed without enough floor input. The schedule overloaded 2 driver teams during restaurant delivery windows. Cold storage timing was being missed because warehouse staff were adjusting by hand after software errors. The clients were angry because the delays were predictable, and nobody above operations had admitted that. Nadia started typing. Graham sat forward. Victor asked who had warned management. Matteo named Ron Bell. Then he named 2 driver leads. He named the North Route team and the restaurant group affected first. He described how temporary authority should be given to people on the floor to rebuild route blocks before the next delivery cycle. He did not sound like a poor boyfriend. He sounded like the only person in the room who had listened. Nadia asked what he would do in the first week. Matteo answered. He said he would pause the current scheduling rollout, create a floor-led route review, separate cold chain deliveries from general restaurant drops for 10 days, and bring Ron into daily planning until the failure points were mapped. Graham wrote that down. I could hear the pen moving. That tiny sound made me angry. I said Matteo would never have had access to that boardroom without my family. The words were true. Cleanly true. Matteo looked at me and said yes. That was true. For 1 second I felt the old ground beneath me. Then he said access opened the door, but listening taught him what to do inside it. Nobody helped me after that. I looked at Elise. She was watching her hands. I looked at Graham. He was reading his notes. I looked at Nadia. She would not meet my eyes. I picked up my phone and checked Blair's chat again. Still nothing. One small absence where laughter used to be. Victor pushed back from the table. He said he had spent years preparing to give me the company. He said he had paid for my education, placed me near every executive conversation, and given me every chance to learn from people who knew more than I did. I said I had learned. He said I had learned Polish. Then he said I had just shown him I would burn the company down while blaming the people carrying water. The room stayed quiet. Victor asked board counsel to bring in the folder. No one at the table asked what folder he meant. That silence was more frightening than any speech. The next morning, I arrived at the board counsel's conference room 10 minutes early. The glass walls looked into the executive corridor, where people moved carefully because they knew something had happened. Nadia was already inside with a paper cup of coffee. She did not offer me one. Board counsel placed a folder in front of me. The document on top was titled Board Resolution 24-17, Succession Track Removal and Interim Operations Rescue Appointment. My hands stayed flat on the table for several seconds. Then I picked up the first page and read my name. Cressida Whitmore was removed from the executive succession track effective immediately. Matteo Cruz was appointed Interim Operations Rescue Director with authority over logistics, warehouse systems, and driver coordination. The next milestone was a 90-day performance review. If his rescue plan met the board targets, the resolution allowed permanent executive control and a structured equity transfer. Victor sat across from me. I said he could not give family authority to someone outside the family. He said blood did not protect a company from contempt. Graham said the business could not survive another year of image-first leadership. Nadia added that Matteo had listened when I would not. Board counsel slid a second page forward and said the access change was already active. Neutral. Exact. Not cruel. I tried my keycard at the executive corridor after the meeting. The small reader blinked red. Security checked the screen and told me my access level had changed. Blair did not answer when I called from the corridor. A minute later, she sent a message saying she did not want to be involved in family business matters. Matteo met me near the security desk. I told him he should thank me because without me, he would never have reached the boardroom. He said I was right. Then he said he was done being the poor boyfriend I used to make myself feel brave. He walked toward the warehouse floor where Ron Bell and the operations team were waiting. My office moved from the executive suite to a temporary advisory room with no decision authority. My company card worked only for approved expenses. Blair stopped inviting me to private dinners because my fall was no longer elegant gossip. Matteo spent 90 days on the warehouse floor, and people followed his plan. At industry events, nobody asked when I would take over anymore. The thing is, I thought money proved level. I thought my family name made me naturally fit to lead. I thought Matteo's poverty made him temporary, useful only as realism, honesty, and a lesson I could tell about myself. But he understood people I never saw. And those people were the company. My silver keycard stayed in my purse, smooth, useless, and cold. I tried poverty like a costume, and my father gave my inheritance to the man who had survived it.